Chapter 1946, The Elf. Zhang Yi saw arrogance on the elf's face, but that arrogance came from absolute confidence. It was as if everything he said was the truth of the world. No wonder legend said that elves were the most arrogant race. It turned out that in ancient times, there really was a race like that. Zhang Yi raised the corners of his mouth and said lightly, "I've heard many people talk to me like that in my life. But do you know what happened to them in the end?" The elf raised his eyebrows. "They all died a miserable death." "Oh, I'm sorry." Zhang Yi suddenly pretended to cover his mouth and smiled apologetically. "I forgot, you're already dead." The elf frowned, arrogant. He raised his hand and drew the long sword at his waist. In an instant, the world behind him changed. Dark clouds gathered in the sky, lightning flashed, and strong winds descended from the sky, forming more than a dozen huge tornadoes. Wind, thunder. What else? As soon as he made his move, Zhang Yi assessed his opponent's abilities and strength in his mind. The elf said nothing, only raising his long sword in an extremely elegant manner and swinging it far away from him. It was like a conductor waving a baton. In the next moment, a storm gathered behind him, and 3 huge mountains appeared between heaven and earth, dark and dense, with terrifying storms gathering. Each storm could easily cover an entire city, with silver lightning running through the storm like huge silver snakes. In an instant, the elf controlled the 3 huge thunderclouds and swept towards Zhang Yi. It all happened in an instant. When Zhang Yi saw them, they were already not far away. Zhang Yi did not take this imposing attack lightly, but he was not particularly afraid either. This kind of physical attack was difficult to work on him. No matter what your storms and thunder are, I can break them with a single-dimensional gate. Everything under heaven protected Zhang Yi's body, and 3 huge storms as big as mountains instantly struck, trapping Zhang Yi in a hypnosis. The powerful storms created low-pressure areas, which then closed in. However, the moment they came into contact with the dimensional gate, they were absorbed by Zhang Yi. The roaring sound stopped, and Zhang Yi's dimensional gate was intact, without any damage. After all, this was considered the strongest defense technique in the human world. Unless the energy level of the attack exceeded Zhang Yi's 2,000 points, it wouldn't even be enough to make the dimensional gate tremble. As for completely destroying it, apart from a small number of special ability users with the trait system, only the powerful underground civilization that completely crushed Zhang Yi with their absolute strength could do so. The dimensional gate swallowed the elf's attack, and Zhang Yi frowned slightly. Is that it? However, a smile appeared on the elf's face, and the surrounding ghosts also looked unconvinced. That attack just now was only a test. If you can't even handle an attack of that level, I'll leave the battlefield. You're too weak and unworthy of my attention. Now, we can make the game a little more interesting. As the elf spoke, he twisted his wrist and removed a silver wrist guard, casually throwing it on the ground. Zhang Yi paid attention to the location of the wrist guard, secretly wary that it might be some kind of powerful weapon. He didn't think the other party would make meaningless movements. Then, how about the next strike? The elf raised his sword, pointing the tip directly at Zhang Yi's face. An elegant smile appeared on his face, and a strand of silver light burst forth from his body, making him look as noble as a god. However, when the sword tip was aimed at Zhang Yi, a fierce killing intent approached in an instant. Boom! The sword light was as if it had come from the sky, so dazzling and overwhelming. Zhang Yi did not dodge, but waited quietly in place. The sword light slammed into the dimensional gate. This time, the surface of the door actually shook slightly, as if a breeze had blown across the water. The power of this strike was much greater than before. But Zhang Yi still allowed the sharp edge of his sword to pierce the dimensional gate. A moment later, this powerful force was completely absorbed by Zhang Yi. Oh? Not bad. You can even block this move. The elf said indifferently. However, Zhang Yi laughed coldly. You seem very confident in your moves. Of course, after all, those are my attacks. In that case, Zhang Yi waved his hand, I'll return all the power of your sword to you. A silver light flashed from the dimensional gate, and the roar of thunder resounded throughout the four directions. The elf's sword and 3 huge thundercloud storms were released from the dimensional gate by Zhang Yi. All he had to do was change their direction, and they would attack the elf's body. Seeing this, the elf's original plan was instantly halted. The corners of his mouth turned up in a smile, a reaction to encountering an interesting prey. "You really surprised me." He stood in place with his sword in one hand, elegant as ever, with no intention of dodging. Zhang Yi didn't dodge, so of course he wouldn't retreat, especially since it was his own attack. He was confident that he could block it. Holding his sword in one hand before him, silver light erupted from his body, as if he were standing within a pure white full moon. This moon formed his defense, while his attack closed in. The storm and sword light collided simultaneously with the brilliant moon, causing even the spirit to furrow his brows slightly under the impact. He had wanted to show off, but he was only a commanding figure for 3 seconds before he was pushed back by a powerful force and sent flying. Whoosh! His feet plowed 2 deep furrows in the ground, and the elf had to exert a great deal of strength to shake off this powerful force. However, he did not show any signs of displeasure, but instead laughed loudly. "It's no wonder it's me. This power is truly terrifying." Zhang Yi couldn't help but roll his eyes. How could this man be so narcissistic? Even Lu Karen said, "Although this guy's face is very charming, for some reason, I really want to punch him in the face." The others nearby nodded in agreement. "You're very interesting. It seems that I need to use even more powerful force to play with you." As the elf spoke, he took off the arm guard on his right hand. Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes. What does his actions mean? The first arm guard he took off was thrown on the ground, and Zhang Yi didn't see anything special about it. If it was something like a powerful energy bullet, it wouldn't have been placed there. But he knew that the elf must have done this for a reason, and if he ignored it, he would definitely suffer greatly. Chapter 1947, Time Stands Still. Just as Zhang Yi was thinking, the elf sheathed his long sword. He reached behind him, and suddenly a green light appeared behind him. The elf took out a huge emerald green longbow from behind him. The longbow was made entirely of green branches, and it even had dense leaves and flowers growing on it. It didn't look like a deadly weapon, but rather an elegant ornament. The elf faced Zhang Yi, spread his long arms, and pulled back the beautiful longbow. The air emitted a sharp hiss, as if something was cutting through metal, or as if a bird was flying rapidly across the sky. An invisible arrow appeared on his longbow, and one could only vaguely sense its existence through the changes in light and shadow. It was sharp. Zhang Yi felt the power of these 2 words. For some reason, just being pointed at by the elf's arrow made him feel a slight stinging sensation on his skin. What is that? Zhang Yi's body sank slightly, and his left eye flashed with light and shadow. No matter what means his opponent used, he had one chance to be exempt from all damage and could predict all of his opponent's attacks 4 seconds in advance. This was not an absolute invincible ability. If the other party had a higher level of law of cause and effect, or if the rules of time above him interfered with his ability to predict time, his predictions would be rendered useless. The second hand of time. Zhang Yi directly activated his predictive ability. In the future he foresaw, he deliberately did not dodge this attack, but chose to block it head-on. The invisible arrow shot out in an instant, turning into a phantom light, and in the blink of an eye, it came directly in front of Zhang Yi at an incredible speed. The speed was so fast that Zhang Yi couldn't react at all. It was light. It was as fast as a flash, penetrating his dimensional gate without any obstruction. Dozens of dimensional gates were intact, and it passed through them just like that. Unlike the light and shadow created by Deng Shintong's supernatural ability, this was a higher-level ability. Light had no mass or thickness, it could even cross dimensional gaps and shoot towards Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi's reaction speed was fast enough to raise his magic sword to block it, but he couldn't use his full strength in such a hurry, and the magic sword was knocked away. Then, countless points of light exploded before his eyes. Like fireworks exploding, arrows of light with no thickness turned into a sky full of illusory light in the space in front of his eyes. Countless light particles shot into his eyes and every corner of his body, passing through the barriers between his cells. The power of radiation destroyed his smallest structures. He turned into a sieve, covered with tiny cracks that were difficult to detect, and then blood spread from the surface of his skin. Thud. His nerves lost control of his body, and he knelt directly on the ground. Then his body collapsed like a soft animal, and red, yellow, green, and white liquids gushed out from his skin. When he came to his senses, Zhang Yi was shocked. The power of this ability was beyond his imagination. No wonder the elf man could be at the source among this group of dead souls. If even the dead souls possessed such powerful strength, Zhang Yi couldn't even imagine how strong the elf man would be if he were still alive. But now was not the time to admire his opponent. He had to find a way to block this attack. Become a dead soul. A charming smile appeared on the elf man's lips, but he didn't hesitate when he attacked. The phantom light arrow left the bowstring and arrived in front of Zhang Yi in an instant. Zhang Yi opened his mouth and took a gentle breath. In the next moment, the world froze. The minute hand of the hour and the blink in the sky accelerated to the speed of light, putting himself in a state of stillness relative to the entire material world. This move had another name, infinite acceleration. Only in this state could he see that beam of light. Then he crossed the beam of light and arrived in front of the elf man. As he approached him, he could still see the arrogant and confident smile on the elf's face. His posture was elegant and contained unparalleled power, as if he could control everything. But at this moment, in the blink of an eye, Zhang Yi could decide his victory or defeat. The right hand of the demon god's armor was a demon god glove made of various fine scales, which directly grabbed the elf's thin and long neck, then twisted it with all his might. Snap! Time returned to normal. In the eyes of the other lost souls, they saw something incredible. They didn't see Zhang Yi move at all, but it was as if he had teleported, appearing directly beside the elf from several kilometers away, then slowly walking behind him. In the next moment, the elf's head fell from his neck. Even in death, he still had that arrogant smile on his lips. What? What happened? Odbo pointed at the battlefield, his voice hoarse from the shock. No one else could answer his question because they were all staring with their mouths open, their eyes filled with disbelief. Among the souls, even the most powerful elves had been killed by a human kid without any warning. The key was that they hadn't seen the process. It was as if they had skipped to the answer when doing a problem and had no idea what the process was. Everything was too strange. Even these powerful beings who had once been glorious in a certain era were surprised. At this moment, the white-bearded old man stroked his beard, looked at Zhang Yi with a frightened look, and said slowly, "He stopped time." What? What? Everyone shouted in shock at the same time. They had only heard of the ability to stop time in legends. It was said that only terrifying beings who had reached a level close to that of gods, such as the Drucker gods and the top powerful beings of ancient mighty god-level civilizations, could possibly reach this realm. But today, they had actually seen such a being with their own eyes. However, this young man didn't seem that strong. But soon, their eyes all changed as they looked at Zhang Yi, becoming incredibly intense. It was precisely because Zhang Yi's strength had not yet reached that terrifying level that he had mastered the ability to stop time, which proved just how terrifying his potential was. If he became even stronger, how powerful would his abilities become? This was beyond their imagination. Perhaps he really could complete the sealing of Mammon and save everyone.